Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No. But I respect some of the superstitions. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum, now in beautiful Bakersfield, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today you are tuning in to Spell It Out, Magic, Reflections, and Shadows, where I take a topic and run with it. Today I'm going to be answering the question of whether or not you can do accurate and objective readings on and for yourself. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our show. I'm really excited to be coming from our new studio, and it's got a whole new look and a whole new vibe, and we are thrilled. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We have a bunch of great guests coming up. We are going to have next week Earl Grey Anderson, who we are really looking forward to. He's going to do a show on Men in Black, and we've been wanting to do that for quite a while. We're going to follow that up with Georgina Surrett Armstrong-Smith, the Priestess of Avalon, and then witchcraft practitioner Sarah Mastros. And then at the end of the month, our ceremonial magician, Mavius Lynn. So all kinds of great guests. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SAXTH, all spelled out. And while you're there, if you can afford to, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. It really helps us a lot. But the main thing, click like and subscribe. So we've got so much to cover today. It's a great topic and not much time. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time. So with that, take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Michael, for working so hard to set up this studio. He set up the physical components, the technical, and he also ordered this beautiful banner in the back. And he was the one that designed our logo. And I think you could see a good part of it. So we're really excited about this new studio because we have a lot of control over it. I also wanted to say Happy May Day for all of those people listening that follow the old ways and celebrate May Day, whether you call it Beltane or May Day. So I hope you're having a great day. So I decided to do this topic because it is a question people ask me, and even as a reader, you can ask yourself whether or not it is accurate or good in a way to do readings just for yourself and on yourself. And if so, how do you go about doing it? When I started thinking about the topic, one of the things that came to my mind that can be an obstacle for some people is that there is this, I think maybe in the public eye a little bit more, but even within some readers, people think that abilities are gifts. Now, I'm not going to say that people are never born with a particular gift. But my definition of a gift would be someone like Edgar Cayce, who not only could he do these trance, he'd go into a trance and then he could see clairvoyantly, even inside the body. But as a boy, he could sleep on books, and in the morning he would know what was in the book. And they tested him on this. So that is kind of a gift, really. When children see and talk to the dead or they have psychic abilities, I think personally that's normal. And I think that most people, in fact, everyone does, I think, have the ability to be psychic. You might have a predilection to do it maybe through astrology or maybe through palmistry. You might have an inclination. So to me, what some people call gifted readers, I would say talented, or they've worked hard to develop their muscles. And so I personally kind of don't like to be called gifted for that reason. Also because of the idea that for me, perhaps I was a sensitive child. That's true. That could have gone into other things though. And for me as a reader, I've worked really hard to develop my skills on all levels. So I don't want people to think, oh, she just has this ability and that's that, So it can get into the way, what if you say, well, I have no gift? And what if you think you're not psychic and you don't have, maybe that hasn't been developed? So luckily, you don't have to have a gift to be a wonderful reader. And also, you can develop some psychicism by doing readings. You'll soon find out. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. My first answer to the question is I do believe that you can do readings for and on yourself. And I do think there are some things that are good to be aware of when you do it. My very first show I did on Spell It Out was called Know Thyself. And one of the things you want to do before you start doing readings on yourself is to know yourself. You want to know what kind of biases that you have. So are you a hypochondriac? Do you tend to be slightly more pessimistic, optimistic? And if it's something that's extreme, then I would say you could certainly do a reading for yourself on that topic. But I would say you'd want to get a second opinion. But just simply knowing your biases, you can sort of factor in. One of the things when I first started doing timing is I noticed that I tended to be a little quick in my timing. And so I sort of adjusted myself based on knowing that I tended to be a little fast when looking at timing and reading. So that was because I kind of knew myself, and that was the way I was in general. Another really cool way to find out your bias, if you're really a fan of tarot, there's an exercise I learned from one of Silver Ravenwolf's books years ago, and it was to go through the deck and take out all the cards that you absolutely adore and all the cards that you absolutely feel revolted by or you have a reaction to, and anything kind of extreme. And there lies some of your biases. And I would say we all have one or two cards that we're just falling in love with all the time. And then there's the one that you go, eek, did I get that card? And by the way, it isn't always the Tower. It can be something that no one else reacts to. So it's really interesting to discover what your biases are with that kind of a tool if you want. Now, when you do if you do decide to, and I encourage people to do readings on themselves and for themselves, and there's a couple of reasons why. One is that no matter, how many people you go to, you're the one that knows yourself the most, and also you're the most invested in your own life. And then when you take the example, for instance, if you are a person interested in astrology and you want to learn to interpret your own natal chart and transits, no matter how many astrologers you go to, astrology is so complex and deep that it really is helpful if you take the time to go deeper with a topic in astrology than simply going to an astrologer alone. So you can start with pretty much any kind of tool if you want to learn to read for yourself. One of the ones I started with, and I was young, and of course I wanted to know about myself, is numerology. Numerology, if you follow a specific school of numerology, like the Pythagorean school is very popular, they do tend to have the same or similar definitions of the basic numbers. You will get into variations of whether or not it's good to look at a double digit or single digit number, but it is a good place to start because it's got that sort of factual information, if you want to call it, on each of the numbers. And it's very simple to actually calculate your numbers, whether it's your life path number or your numbers from your name. And you can also start by looking at what the number of the year is for you or your month cycles. And so it's not overwhelming. And certainly a really good numerologist can get into complexities and things that you might not in the beginning. But I would say that it's a wonderful way to start looking at cycles for yourself and trying to understand yourself. But I would say you can basically use any tool you want that you have an interest in. So if you're interested in palmistry, if you're interested in tarot, you can start to use those tools for yourself. I think that the other thing that can get in the way of some ideas about readings is it, right for you to do a reading on yourself? Is it selfish? Are readings meant to be only for other people and for helping other people? And I would say that, the idea of doing things from a selfless point of view in a realistic way is good in general. But I think you can do that for yourself. You can learn to be objective and sort of see, am I, I'm going to want to take this job and look and see if it's really good for me overall. So I think that really that shouldn't be an obstacle, but I could see where some people might think it is an obstacle. So as I said, you can pretty much do any of the tools you want. Now, since I'm a tarot card reader primarily, I'll start with the idea of some suggestions for using the tarot. So one of the things you can start with, if let's say you have a basic knowledge of the tarot, because you would want to have that if you're going to be doing readings, though of course you could learn the tarot by doing some readings on yourself. So one of the things I recommend for people is a 3-card reading of your day ahead. And you don't even need to really do a prediction. You can just do the cards, lay them out. You can take a picture of it if you like and keep a journal, which I know some people do. And you can either attempt to interpret the energies without predicting, or you can also look at the end of the day and see how it correlates with the cards. And the more you do that, you're going to want to do that for a little while, because you'll start seeing repetitions of themes. You might get the same card a lot. You might see that the energy hasn't changed much in a day or two. So it's a really great way to do it without being intimidated by even doing a Celtic cross. And I did find it helpful in the beginning to take notes. And I didn't have as organized a notebook as some people have. I know someone that's kept track of all of their readings on, with their phone, and that's kind of amazing, actually. Mine is like on little pieces of paper that I find here and there, stuck in my journal. Nevertheless, it's a good idea if you can to keep track of it for a while. And then you can also, one of the things you can do is, besides kind of keeping track of it all the time. I was going to say something about doing readings for friends, but again, we're talking about doing it for yourself. Now, I also find it really, really useful to look at my own natal chart. And one of my theories about Pluto in Aquarius, which we are now almost completely in for the next 20-some years, is the idea that I think that Pluto is going to change our relationship with some of the divination systems, including astrology. And I think that it's going to, people know so much more in depth about their own natal charts. I think it's going to start to be more of a collaborative idea of going to an astrologer and having a particular theme that you want to dig into. Like, let's say you have a really, strong Saturn and you want to understand it. You might find someone specializing in Saturn. And I think it's going to be an equalizing experience rather than, which is what I did when I was younger, going to astrologers, and they told me things about my chart, which I didn't question a lot, at least initially. Now, luckily, I got really good information, but I think it's important that we start to collaborate with the people we go to, including the tarot card readings. But one of the differences with tarot is it's really got, because of the cards and being so visual, it really sort of puts the energy onto the cards themselves. And me as a reader, I see myself as an interpreter. So if someone tries to put me up on a pedestal or things like that, I don't let them. And I just sort of talk about, this is the cards and this is my interpretation of the cards. And so to me, there's almost a little bit more of an equalizing, diffusing energy, even in the fact that you're both looking at the cards when you're talking. And you don't really have that you could have that maybe in palmistry a little bit, but really the tarot is really good at that, sort of diffusing the power and putting it back on the cards, really. So you don't have that as a problem. But that was one of the things I've been thinking about, is that it's going to change how Pluto in Aquarius is going to change how we actually go to astrologers. If you want to, for instance, learn to look at your own chart, there are books actually out there that teach you to read your own chart. And one that's very in-depth is Demeter George and Douglas Block. They have it's extremely in-depth. You go like point by point through your own chart to understand it. And I do recommend, if you like astrology like I do, it's very helpful to be able to do that for myself. And even just knowing what the transits are coming up, I can work with them more consciously. And then you can also kind of put in your own spin on the interpretations. So one of the things I did mention earlier is that the idea of biases. So if I have a bias, which I have a couple, one, I am a bit of a hypochondriac. And so for me, if I do a health reading, because I'm fortunate to have a husband that can read and he's very objective, I will get his opinion on it. And then I can see if I'm like being too fearful, and he's been very accurate with some of the problems I've had in the past. So going to, someone else, whether you pay them or not, is really helpful if you have something where you have a really strong bias. Another thing is I'm not advocating for never going to other people to get advice, because obviously it's really helpful for many reasons. It's helpful because even if you have a similar result, let's say this happens to people with cards a lot. They'll say, oh, I pulled those cards this morning. But I might have, the reader who is interpreting it might have a different take on it. And they might have, even the way they say what they say can also kind of put some thoughts into your mind. So I think it's also very enjoyable to get a reading from a good, solid reader. I've been very lucky when I was younger. I went to, not tons of readers because I probably couldn't afford it. But also I tended to use the information a lot for a long period of time. And I always had I would say 98% of the time, a really good experience. I felt really connection, and I felt it was very enjoyable. So sometimes it's definitely good to go to a reader to get out of your own head. Maybe it'll just confirm what you already know about something. The other thing which I first thought, kind of humorously is, but I actually think there's something to it, is that whether or not, if I do a reading on myself, will I take my own advice? And, that might seem kind of strange, but really it isn't so strange. Edgar Cayce himself, I remember reading, he had received information from the source, which is what he called where he got his information about people, about their health, and about reincarnation. The source told him to slow down and not to do as many readings, but he did not take the advice. So in a way, he was telling himself, and he died at an early-ish age, and maybe some other things too. I think he was told to listen to. So he was a Pisces, so I think it was hard for him to say no to people and not do the reading. But that idea is, do you listen to yourself? Do you take advice from yourself? Have you ever had that moment where you have an intuition and you don't follow it? It can teach you perhaps to listen more to your own wisdom and your thoughts. So I think you would want to factor that idea in. However, are you a person that normally would take advice from yourself? So that's pretty much the general view I have on the idea of whether or not you can actually do an accurate reading for you. Now, the other thing is, for some reason, I think people think it's unethical. And that, again, goes back to the idea of whether or not, readings are only for the helping other people. I did want to read and share something I got out of one of the books on Cayce. And it's a really wonderful biography called An American Prophet. It's written by Sidney Kirkpatrick. And anyway, at one point, he answers, when he's in a trance, Edgar Cayce answers the question about what kinds of questions you should be put in front of Cayce. And this kind of goes to the heart of, to me, why anyone would go for a reading. And the answer was this: ask what kinds of questions should be put to Cayce while in trance. The source answered, only those that are in accord with spiritual and soul forces and laws. According to the source, the proper questions should consist of those that lead to relief from pain or suffering, as long as they are not at the expense or detriment of another individual. So I think that sums it up. You could ask the cards or astrology any question with that intention of, wanting to know the real answer and something that's not detrimental. I have found tarot is really good at times at analyzing when people come in for a reading, if they have a secret agenda that they're not sharing with you. And so what I mean by that is someone that can come in and seem very open to the reading, they want the reading, but underneath it, there's some other sense of why they're there. And I think that can affect the reading. I think that people that tend to get clearer information in general, they come with honest intentions. They really want to know what's going on with their relationship, what's going on with their job. And that is their clear intention. And by the way, it can be a mundane question. We're not talking about just spiritual questions. And I remember when I first started reading, as a reader, I would get the secret agenda that some people would come in with, and they were usually readers, is they wanted to test me and they wanted to see if I was any good. And I find that to be really just annoying. So, because I never did that and I wouldn't think of doing that. I don't mind skepticism, but going in without talking to the person about whether they can be tested it's fine if they talk about it up front. But the idea I'm going to secretly see if they're any good at all. And readers have a tendency to do that sometimes with other readers. I don't get that as often, and it probably wouldn't bother me now, but it sort of was a little unnerving in the beginning. So I would say don't do that to other readers. If you want to know if they're any good, just see what their reputation is. See if they, other people have gone there. And that's how I always went to readers, was through referrals and people I trusted. So that's generally what I wanted to talk about with this topic. I also today wanted to get back to the idea of sharing a spell in my show, Spell It Out, which I've done sort of sporadically. And I'm going to pick a spell based on maybe just anything. So today I'm picking a spell based on the idea that there's a lot of anger and violence going through the world right now, particularly in the US. And some of it I find is understandable, and some of it I feel is really over the top and playing into the aggressive side of our nature in a very unproductive way. So I thought I'd pick a spell that was connected to building peace in a simple way. So this one is called Building a Serenity Altar. And I got this from Witch's Brew, Good Spells for Peace of Mind from Witch Bree. It's a lovely little series. I pull spells from it all the time. I love the little books, and they're really good. And many people know that altars can be quite spiritual, and you can even just practice your spirituality by building altars. This one is quite simple. She suggests you get a low table and you place a forest green scarf, brown candles, and natural objects found near your home that represent your environment, leaves and flowers and twigs. And then you add a sweetly scented sachet of potpourri. She said made from your kitchen garden if possible, which I don't have a kitchen garden, so don't worry if you don't. And then add some personal mementos. Now, in her case, she suggested a silver locket with her photograph of her mother, but just something personal, because it's going to be different for everybody. And it doesn't have to be silver. It might not have a silver locket, but something that's personal. And then she says, take your favorite essential oils and burn some in an oil lamp. Then anoint the candles while concentrating on peace and bliss surrounding your home. And this is a spell you say aloud. It's really lovely and simple. Here burns happiness about me. Peace and harmony are in abundance, and here true happiness surrounds. From now on, there is only abundance, and disharmony is gone. Be it ever thus that happiness is the light that burns bright here. This is a home of peace and blessings. Here, happiness lives. So it's a very simple chant. I really love that. And you can say that once or 3 times. I always like doing things in 3s. I think that's a very magical number. And I also like what she says at the end of this particular spell. She says that your altar connects you to the earth, of which you are a part, of which you are made. You're all made from the earth, and we all go to the earth at the end of our lives. So I thought that was really beautiful. And then, of course, you can either keep the altar up, or it could be a temporary altar. But certainly you can make variations on it. But I just like the simplicity of it. And the idea of building peace in your home. I remember a long time ago that Michael and I read in certain tribes, indigenous tribes, people would not yell at home. If they were angry, somebody would leave the house and for a while until their anger calmed down. So it wasn't to repress the anger. They would walk around the block or do something. But the idea of keeping a home peaceful literally was that you didn't even allow certain kinds of arguments inside the house. And I think that there is some truth to that. I can't say that we're perfect in that area, but I do think we really seek to create that atmosphere. And not everyone is really lucky to have an oasis and to have a home they can go to. But I think if you do, no matter how small it is, it can be a room. And then if you take the time to try to build peace in it by doing things you enjoy, by allowing yourself to relax, I do think it can restore the spirit. And I think that idea of home, it certainly used to be a big part of our psyches, that we would go home and relax and rest. And I think it's always a good reminder. So if you have the altar and you've created what you call as a serenity altar, then even just seeing the altar reminds your subconscious, like, hey, this is a peaceful place and I can go sit there and relax and just meditate or sleep. My favorite thing now is sort of lying down meditations just because of my arthritis. So I can't sit up the way I used to a lot of times. So I'll do things that are more relaxing. And main thing with lying down meditations is you have a tendency to go to sleep. So try not to do that. So that was the spell I wanted to share today. I also did want to give a shout out to The Feminine Macabre. Volume 6 has been out now for, I think it was the end of March it came out. And this paranormal, it's a woman's journal of all things strange and unusual. And those of you that follow the show know that we are friends with Amanda Wollmer. We've interviewed her about her own spooky website and all the things she does. And we also, I've been published in previous volumes. I've enjoyed every volume I've read. And so I encourage you to get the volume 6. This one has a foreword by Mara Starling, who looks like a very interesting woman. She's a Welsh witch, and I hear she's very popular on TikTok. So I think that'll be a really good foreword. But if you want to support women in the paranormal and non-binary people, this is the magazine or journal, I should say, to buy, because all the writers are either women or non-binary in identifying themselves. And so that was one of the reasons why the Feminine Macabre was created. And it gives a voice to women that have been involved for centuries and even though they're not writing necessarily, the ones that are dead, that, you don't see in a lot of like media and things. There's a lot more women doing things. So I think you would really enjoy this. I've enjoyed all the articles, and I've gotten to know a lot of the people in the journals as well. We've had several of them on the show too. So please pick up a copy and support the Feminine Macabre. I think in sort of my closing thoughts about whether or not to do readings on yourself, some people might not feel they're capable of doing it, and I think it's perfectly fine to not do readings on yourself. My goal here was really just to say that it's good if you want to do readings on yourself, along with going to other readers. And it can really enhance your experience one way or the other. It can also help you to learn the tool better and to make you feel more connected with whatever the system is. So I mostly want to encourage the people that maybe feel tentative about doing it, but really want to. And I hope that after this show, if you are on the edge, that you say, okay, I'm going to go do a reading for myself. So thank you for listening in to our very first show in Bakersfield, which we are loving so much. So join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a great week.